Hello, this is Dan Wu. Today I'm going to talk about living in my own skin and Buddhist practices. I am not going to spend a lot of time describing in any kind of detail the hows and tos of these practices, which include mindfulness, contemplative meditation practices from various schools of Buddhism. When I mention each one, I'll try to enunciate well. You can look up what they are using search engines. There are thousands and thousands of resources now on the web at web publications and Buddhist sites in the popular literature and news about every one of the practices that I'll talk about. Instead, I want to start off with the idea of living in my own skin. It's an idea that becomes only real when I'm okay where I am, with how I feel, with what's going on outside of me. In other words, I equate living in my own skin with being okay. Because if I'm not living where I am right now, where else am I going to live? Many religions and faiths and paths treat have a concept that we have an enduring soul or self, that it's just a matter of trying to find that enduring integrated soul or self to bring up the true soul or true self in order to be happy. Buddhism is different. It's the idea of self is in a sense, a contingent idea of what we are at any one moment is the present intersection of causes, conditions going as far back and beyond what history records. It's a intersection of the web of life. We're never interdependent upon what's both outside and inside us. In the last year, I became very interested in the findings of the human biome or the human gut. It was amazing to read that scientists have determined that there are trillions of microbiome creatures, uh, single-celled organisms and the like, that have more DNA combined than what a human DNA chain is, and that influences our decision making, our moods, our thinking, our health. Uh, because this scientific finding for me is more confirmation of the Buddhist idea that we're more uh, of our dependency on many contingent things. In the case of the human biome, uh, literally there are trillions of single cell creatures who are essential for me being the quote me unquote that I think I am. Other findings about childhood toxic stress, about wartime traumas, about the passage on uh, in the embryos of the trauma being experienced by my parents or past generations, uh, literally affecting my DNA expression, affecting how my brain architecture is formed, affecting how I think, how I react, how I feel. That's also science explaining that there are causes and conditions going well beyond my own memory and beyond my parents and their parents and their parents and their parents' memories that all come to some sort of fruition or connection at each moment. The Buddhist approach, however, is not a fatalistic one because the concept, which is put into practice through a variety of Buddhist practices, is that when I can make an intentional, conscious decision in this moment to act or not act, my action action meaning conscious inaction, and what we normally think of as action, my action will cause a change that then ripples forward. Uh, my action combines with the karma of the past. And in this sense, karma in Buddhism is just means action. If I commit to becoming kind and having actions that show compassion, wisdom, tolerance, acceptance, non-judgment, helpfulness, encouragement, and the like, not only do I experience some form of happiness or joy, but that action becomes part of a stream of actions that go forward that may come to fruit in some other person or in some other way that is more likely beneficial. Many years ago, over 13 years ago, in the working environment I was at, most people, including myself, felt that a drink at the end of the day or a drink at lunch would ease the stress of the day. That kind of approach for a distraction to ease the stress for people can go to alcohol, drugs, including prescription medication, food, buying new things, many other approaches which do not actually help develop that conscious, intentional, wise way to act or not to act. Now, I'm only saying this in hindsight because in all the years of before I began Buddhist practices, I used to consider myself fairly normal. I'm not, however, I realize I'm not normal. That among other people who had childhood trauma and toxic stress, much of my way of thinking and acting were burnt into my system, were hardwired into me from birth, and part of releasing and letting go is learning what they are and to interrupt reactive approaches and to adopt intentional actions. I'm going to list in no particular order the daily practices that I've been committed to in Buddhism for 13 years and 8 months, plus another set of Chan Buddhism forms of meditation that I started 3 months ago. So I'll begin with the initial group. The Satipatthana Sutra is in the Buddha's first cycle of teachings. It's his description of how to be mindful. A common English translation is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. When this was brought into the West in the early 1970s, it became known as insight meditation, and it is the foundation for the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and associated groups all over the United States, including the Seattle Insight Meditation Society. The 4 foundations of mindfulness is a practice in awakening up and becoming aware of the body, of feelings, of thoughts, and of a set or a large set of ideas or principles or philosophies that one contemplates. It's a lifelong practice, I was taught. It's lifelong for me in another sense that at no point have I not stopped learning or experiencing um, new experiences out of daily practice. Another central practice is metta or loving kindness. I began that after buying Sharon Salzberg's uh, book, Loving Kindness, in early 2003. It's a best-selling New York Times best-selling book. There are ample resources today in other books um, from Buddhist websites, from spirituality websites, on YouTube and social media to find a variety of instructions on how to do metta or loving kindness practices and a variety of uh, thoughts, blogs, articles, essays on loving kindness. The third set of meditations are derivatives of Tonglen, which is the Tibetan Great Compassion practice. I've talked about that in another video on this channel. Again, Tonglen, Tonglen, uh, have a huge amount of resources uh, in books and on the web and in social media. Um, Pema Chodron is a famous Buddhist teacher who has explained in many ways how to do Tonglen, what Tonglen is. Hakuin's butter pill meditation is a Zen meditation that Hakuin was taught when he traveled to China in the 14th century looking for the Chan masters. Chan is Chinese Buddhism and is a merger of Chinese Taoism and Buddhism brought to and incorporated in China mythically by Bodhidharma, an Indian traveler to China who started the Shaolin Temple, invented what became Kung Fu, Tai Chi, and internal martial arts variations of Qigong. Today, many Qigong lines, Qigong forms attribute to their lineages to Bodhidharma. Qigong was around for a few thousand years before Bodhidharma went to China. A fourth set of practices involve different ways to do walking meditations. These are all practices that are intentional practices to be helpful toward learning how to pay attention, how to be in the present, how to actually see what comes up, to feel what comes up, to smell what comes up, to sense what's come up when walking, rather than being caught in thoughts. Buddhism teaches something called right view. And right view is a combination of realization that everything changes, that we don't have some enduring self independent of uh, causes and conditions, circumstances, family, culture, societies, and a huge, impossible to identify effect of various courses of energy, time, history, stories that come down to us. What does this really mean, not to be caught in my own skin? that I can live in my own skin. What it really means for me is that I'm not always consciously or unconsciously seeking to distract. If I'm not feeling good about something that happened at work, um, commonly rather than quieting down and re-examining why I'm feeling this way, I'm actually in full reaction mode. And then my thoughts and stories can take over and it will make a story out of that. So a slight, let's for example, a slight insult uh, persists for days and weeks or months or years after it occurred, long after um, the time when it happened. In effect, I'm just punishing myself and being victimized over and over again by my own thinking and feelings and reactions. That's an example of not living in my own skin. Another example is uncertainties. Um, Anybody who's lived long enough realize that there is no way a human being can be certain of what's going to happen tomorrow, no matter what kind of planning is put into it, uh, how many smart people are put on a project, uh, how good we think we are or the people around us are. Uh, Good example is SpaceX exploded uh, recently, and I'm sure that SpaceX has some combination of the best engineers and developers and scientists in the country when they create a rocket. Yet these rockets fail. Another example is just think of your own life. How often are you actually able to sketch out what will happen in terms of your projects for tomorrow? How many of your to-do lists can be stricken through? Um, I was extreme perfectionist. I used to believe that I can live by planning ahead. I remember in my first year at college at UC Berkeley, I was in a advanced math physics program. It was an honors program, and I used the catalog. That in those days, all catalogs were printed. In those days, signing up for classes meant you have to walk around the different buildings on campus and physically sign up in the buildings where the sign-in sheets were. I actually, before the signing up of the first quarter's classes, I used a catalog. I used a spreadsheet. Spreadsheet in those days were not electronic. It was just a graph paper, and I charted out all the classes that were in the catalog that I wanted to take to have my major uh, uh, requirements met in 4 years and to uh, learn subject matters that I was interested in. So I don't remember how long I did this, but I remember starting at night and going to bed sometime early a.m. Um, on the day I was to begin marching around, signing up for classes. And of course, on the first day of signing up, I discovered I couldn't get into some classes I wanted for fall quarter, so I had to find other ones. And shortly after that, a few months after that, when the new quarters came, they were changed. All the scheduling, many of the scheduled classes were changed. They no longer were being taught or were not being taught on the day uh, that they were shown to be taught in the previous quarter's catalog. Um, Even today, that happens. I don't create to-do lists. I have a moving blocking of a calendar on which I put down tasks I would like to accomplish. Some tasks are actually have due dates, and for those, there's a hard line exclamation point deadline I put on the in my block time. Everything else can be moved, and one interesting result of approaching blocking time this way is that many things I have blocked time for no longer needed to be done. Uh, I remember driving our older son to a library in um, East King County. He had a writing project that was assigned by his school. He was in high school uh, at the beginning of a quarter, and this was one day before the assignment was due. He told me that the book he needed wasn't available. It had been checked out in all the Seattle libraries, and the only one he could find was in Redmond, Washington. Um, so we marched down to the car. I was concerned that if there were a Seahawks game that day, and there might have been, I don't remember, that the traffic could be horrific. As it turned out, we got there in 40 minutes or so, and he got the book, and he got a high grade on what he turned in. Uh, and as we were going there, I mentioned, or I said, that he should plan his life better, and he should give himself some time. And I was pissed off, and I said that. I explained I'm kind of pissed off at this. And he told me, Dad, it's his life. Well, he said, Dad, it's my life. It's not your life. Get over it. If I made a mistake, I'll suffer the consequences. And as we were driving there, I thought about that and said, you know what? He's right. And I also thought back to all the times I've been late for many, many different kinds of things, including professional meetings, appointments, and the like. Usually not because I forgot about it or I didn't give myself enough time, but because of things that were happening in the outside world. Everything from accidents to plane crashes, or in the case of earthquakes, to the Nisqually earthquake. I have proof on a day-to-day basis that what I put down to accomplish that day is affected by other events. And there was a day this particular week where I wound up not doing anything that was in my block of time because some other problem occurred that had to be taken care of. So by not being attached to constantly reminding myself of what I need to get done or think I need to get done and looking at my time right now, I can live in my own skin by being in the time I have right now. The same is true for all kinds of travel, the normal day-to-day bus rides or car drives, or for some people train rides, for other people plane rides. I have had occasions when I used to fly a lot because I had many events or appointments or court hearings or the like in other states. I had to learn how to give myself an extra day flying out after being in some circumstances where the planes were delayed, late, or canceled, and I barely made the appointment or hearing, or did not make it and showed up late. So in those cases, I used to plan for business ones. I would leave at least a day early because I had too many experiences or leaving on the day of meeting or conference or hearing in another state. It just wasn't a good idea. I can go on ad nauseum about examples of living in my own skin. But I think each of you who may be listening to this or seeing this can come up with your own examples. And that's actually a good exercise for meditation. You can meditate on the meaning of time. You can meditate on the meaning of having to get things done. You can meditate on the meaning of why you need to get so many things done. If you're quiet long enough, your entire system, not just the brain organ, can digest and give you answers. That's what, for me, part of meditation does. It's a way to grasp hold of far more resources than I would have in the past. I used to think that if I think long and hard enough about something, an answer will come up, never once really realizing that my thinking process might be flawed or that the data I have might be incomplete. Um, this is not to say that I don't use my brain, because I do use it, but I don't use it in a way to feel like I can't survive in my own skin or to feel distress or agitation or uneasiness. Nor do I need to go out and buy something, eat some kind of food, have a drink, find other distractions for the purpose of being able to live in my own skin. When I do those kinds of things to avoid living in my own skin, they don't let me live in my own skin. They just distract and avoid and hold off until uh, some explosion occurs inside. As you can see, I really haven't used much in the way of Buddhist vernacular. I haven't talked about emptiness, uh, other kinds of words that are common in the Buddhist literature. I'm talking about feelings, about um, what Buddhism really allows us to be, which is to be in our own skin and to help others as well as ourselves by our own actions, including conscious and intentional non-action. I hope something heard here resonates with you, and you can choose for yourself what you want to begin practice with.